you don't have to beat yourself up because your creativity isn't on a capitalist schedule. And so I feel the same way with other people's excuses if it's in that, same realm of creativity.
Hello and welcome to Flowering Creativity. This is the podcast where we explore the lives of creative people and provide practical tips for achieving and sustaining your creative lifestyle and goals. Today, I am honored to speak with Eleanor Goldfield, a creative radical, journalist, and filmmaker. Her work focuses on radical uncensored issues via photo, video, written journalism, as well as artistic mediums including music and visual art. She is the host of the podcast Act Out, co-host of the podcast Common Censored along with Lee Camp, and co-host of the Silver Threads along with Carla Bergman. Her award-winning film Hard Road of Hope is about West Virginia as both resource and radical inspiration. She also assists in frontline action organizing and trainings. Check out artkillingapathy.com and hardroadofhope.com. Also, please check out Eleanor's new music and poetry EP, No Solo. I'm just going to be honest with everybody here. I bought my copy of it, and I love it. I've been sharing it with people, and so please welcome to Flowering Creativity, Eleanor Goldfield.
Thank you. You're like a Mexican football announcer. I'm ready for you to yell goal at any moment.
Oh, you want me to do that voice, do you? Yes, I can do that one too. Very good, sir. So, without further ado, we're going to play Eleanor's clip here. We're going to show the trailer for her Hard Road of Hope film, and then some music. Here we go.
The following might seem like an unimportant story, an old story. In a world obsessed with breaking news, the slow stories of the broken pass undetected. The coal fields now peppered with shrubs and toxic grass, rotting trailer parks and faded dollar store signs. This is a lot more than a broken mountain and a poisoned valley. It's a metaphor for our country. People cast aside in the deep dive for more coal, more profit, more oil, more gas, more. An environment destroyed and just left, and the barons move on, but there's more to protect. There's much more to be salvaged and saved. And there's a past and people to show us the way. This story isn't over. It's just beginning.
I'll wait so many hours, a battle of wills. I will. I stand in their way, defend what you love. I raise my fist. I didn't want this. I wish for justice, though. Your hopes and prayers, your pleading stares don't do a damn thing. I don't wanna be an outlaw, but you made me. But it never seemed right to toe the line when you're drowning. And so it's a crime to fight for your rights in your lives.
I love those lines. Bravo. Bravo. I just love your voice. I love how at the beginning, you know, you were using such a vulnerable vocal fry tone. You were just like easing into it so nice. And then you start belting, and then, you know, the proggy guitars come in, and, you know, I never heard like a full drum set, but the percussion that you used was just perfect. It was really nice, and the guitar solo is really good. The little group that you put together was a duo with the producer or whatever. It was just great. Really, really great job, Eleanor.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I love seeing people rock out, even if it's on Zoom. So I'm glad you dig it.
Yeah, and as far as Hard Road of Hope, I've definitely watched your documentary, and it's great. I highly recommend it. Yeah.
For folks who are interested in hearing the other tracks are, you can listen to them on Spotify or iTunes, but I do ask that you buy it through my website, because I see nothing of the iTunes and Spotify sales because they're monsters. So
Totally. Yeah, I just went right to your website. It was easy. You can even pick your own price. It's great. I actually watched a thing you did for Democracy at Work. I love that channel as well. Shout out. And you were talking about you know, using creativity in a way that inspires change and gets across the message that you're trying to get. You know, how do you use creativity in your work, and how do you mix activism into your work?
I don't really see the two as two disparate things. I think everything is political, you know, because our whole lives are politics. And, you know, the fact that I woke up in an apartment today is political. The fact that somebody picked up my garbage today is political. The sidewalk and the streets that I walk on are political. Everything that you do is political. So there's really no such thing as non-political art. There's only art that avoids talking about politics. And that's fine, right? Like, I think we need love songs. I mean, I'm not going to write them, but I think we need them. But we also need songs that talk about the human condition through that political lens. And, you know, to quote James Baldwin, he said, quote, "Poets, and by that I mean all artists, are the only ones who know what it means to be on this planet and to survive." And I think that is something that we have to share. That is something that, as artists, it's kind of our job to share that in a way that goes deeper than the he left me, she left me, I like him, I like, you know, whatever. I don't see those two as separate things. I see them as deeply intertwined. Also because creative thinking is what drives movements. You know, if you can't think outside the confines of the capitalist system, then there is no imagining a different system, right? There's no imagining a different world that's built on justice and liberation for all. So you have to think creatively, which is, of course, the space that we artists inhabit. So art, you know, bleeding across the borders of like just the typical artistic mediums of music and visual art and things like that, but to thinking creatively, which becomes thinking radically about the issues at hand and the root causes of the oppression and suffering that we see as artists and that we, you know, talk about in our work. So I think, you know, in that sense, they're one and the same. And I would also say, of course, that, you know, music or art is the salve as well. You know, when you're having a bad day, what do? You listen to that song. You know, there are still songs that when I listen to them, I'm like, I'm gonna need a glass of whiskey or something, you know, like, and I think it's the same thing for, you know, people, you know, see that piece of art and they're completely like taken back to that moment or that person or that memory. And I think that that's a huge way that we not only heal, but we connect with each other in this system that is really built off of the division of people and communities. Art is how we connect. Art is how we share those human experiences. So in that way, it's hugely insidious to the establishment. And it's no wonder why the establishment tries to tamp down on art and try to twist it into propagandization, you know, because they're well aware of the power of art as something very human, as this way of manifesting a human connection. So I think there are so many different layers as to how art and, you know, activism or political engagement are intertwined, to the point that, again, I don't really see them as disparate things.
I feel like as artists, it's really, really important for us to, you know, whatever it is in here, you know, to just let it out however it comes out. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's so cool that you do so many different media. I love it.
I think too, like in line with that creative thinking, I think there's far too little of like sitting on a porch and having a beer with someone as an organizing tactic. I think, to me, like, when I talk to people most of the time, even folks on the left that I know are leftists, I don't use words like socialism, communism, anarchism, because everybody has a different answer. Like, everybody would have a different definition of what that means. So it's not useful for me to use it as an organizing tool, because I'm like, I don't know what the hell that means to you. Like, particularly things like anarchy, which, you know, that's what I align myself most with. But I don't know what that means to most people. So they probably think that I just want to light shit on fire, which is not true.
Totally.
So it's, I just tend to, particularly like, you know, I'm from the South. I grew up there partially, as well as in Sweden. And I gotta say, like, one of the most useful things to do is to just sit on a porch with somebody, you know, like it's a stereotype, but drink some sweet tea or a mint julep or something and talk about like, hey, you don't trust the government? I don't trust the government either. Let's talk about why. And you'll quickly find that there are a lot of things that align, because there's an inherent feeling that people get from oppression. And that is where our common ground is, right? When you start using Democrats and Republicans and socialism, and then it starts getting mucked up with the propagandization that people have been fed, whether it's by Fox or whether it's by CNN or what have you. So just sitting like as a person to person, I think is so much more useful. And again, like that goes back to thinking creatively, like as opposed to handing somebody a pamphlet and being like, hey, can I talk to you about, like, you know, democratic confederalism? It's like, no, what is that? No, I don't care. But if you're like, hey, let's have a beer, most people are going to be like, yeah, cool, let's have a beer.
How has the pandemic affected your life and your creativity, Eleanor?
It's really been hard to not be able to travel for both journalistic reasons, because one of the things that I've done for a while is to try to travel to the frontline communities that I'm talking about, so that I'm not just getting it, you know, like down the line, like a game of telephone. Of course, that's not always possible. You know, like I haven't been to Kashmir, but you know, to try to go to these, if it's possible, if I can scrape together the funds to go to these frontline communities and then not only gather stories, but also support them however I can, whether that be, frontline organizing or, just being another body. So that really took a hit, of course. And so that was both, I mean, predominantly it was rough just personally, but of course there's the financial aspect of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the financial and personal aspect of not being able to tour and play shows. That was really rough too. Because as much of an introvert as I am, I do love playing live. It's a beautiful drug. And it's the only one that I know of that doesn't have any bad side effects. So that was really rough. We had to cancel a bunch of shows, and I was also hoping to release the album. The EP was recorded in late 2019, and my goal was to release it in spring, summer of 2020, and then tour with it. But that obviously didn't happen, and so that can kept getting kicked. And then eventually I just felt like I have to release it, even if I can't tour, because for me, every recording is a snapshot of that particular time. And so if I shelve it, I can't actually release it 5 years later, because that's not who I am anymore. Totally. And I'm already a different person now than when I recorded it. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to get it out there. And this was really, to me, the last time that, the last cluster of months where I could get it out there and still feel artistically honest about it. Mm-hmm. So I'd say those were the real tough things to get over. I don't know that I'm over them, but to grapple with, I suppose, would be a better way of putting it. In terms mm-hmm. of the creativity, it was hard. I was playing guitar pretty much, every day or every other day, because, there were shows to play. So I had to stay up on the chops, and I'm not a guitarist. I can play some of the guitar, but I'm not a guitarist.
Sound pretty good to me.
So, and then when the pandemic hit me and all those shows were canceled, I kind of just put the guitar down, and it kind of hurt me to look at it. And I put it aside and started focusing more on things that were creative in other ways, releasing the film, for instance, but a lot of local mutual aid. A lot of storytelling in mutual aid. So basically digging up stories of people here in DC and elsewhere to really, counter the narrative that was being fed from the top down. So I really started focusing more on that. And then I think music and I will always have an odd relationship. But I will always come back. And it's been with me the longest. I started singing when I was 4, so it will always be a part of me. And so when I think when enough time had passed and I'd kind of grappled internally with canceling the shows and diving into other things, I was able to pick up the guitar again and start noodling. And that's when I really decided that okay, well, now I'm going to release this, and I'm going to get it out there. And yeah, this is the last chance for that snapshot in time. So here we go.
I can totally vibe with that, because my wife lost her job. My brother-in-law lost his job. My jobs dried up instantly because I was working for myself. There was no unemployment on the horizon, so we moved into our motorhome. I had been renting it out, so we're living in it. So I got all my stuff all put away, So I didn't play my guitar every day. I didn't play my saxophone every day. I didn't play my ukulele every day. Although I probably played the uke the most, just because it was the quickest and easiest to grab and get out. I lost my calluses. And I was one of those guys that, I would play 3-4 hours and it was not a problem, And then I got to where, if I played for 20 minutes, my fingers are starting to get sore to the point where I was wondering if I was going to be able to finish the whole song. So when we moved back into an apartment finally, a few months ago, and I finally got some really good internet, I was able to start focusing more on bringing music back and performing more. Do you have a daily routine that you do to help you to stay creative and flowing?
I mean, I try to work out every day. Back in the day, I was a personal trainer, so I'm very I get kind of neurotic about working out. Neurotic, not like in a creepy way, like, oh God, if I don't weigh this, like I don't have a scale, none of that crap. But neurotic in the sense that like it is a very important outlet for me. So I do try to work out, almost every day, even if it's, just like a light yoga. So it's not always like, some crazy, like Rocky type shit. So that is important to me. I also try to read every day. And this is not just, not like necessarily a creative book. Like, I guess all books are creative in the sense, but, it could be like the history of, Kropotkin or something. It's not like I'm not always reading something that's philosophical or really intentionally, supposed to be creative. But other than that, like I don't actually like routine. Which is why, the only jobs that I could ever hold down were in studios, recording studios, because every day was so different. And so I don't, I wouldn't even come in the same time every day. And, 8 hours was laughable. Most of the time I would sleep there. So I think like for me, the routine thing just doesn't really like work. And I also don't know, like this is a question I've gotten before. They're like, oh, what's your workflow when you're creating? I'm like, I don't know. I'll have a good idea when I'm on the bus, or if I'm in the shower or something, or like when I've got like, I'm cooking and I've got like, tofu burning, and then I have a really good song idea. And I'm like, well, shit, I have to run and I have to record this idea really fast, even if my dinner gets burned. It's never like an opportune time when I'm sitting down and have the time to, to really address that creative idea. So my muse has terrible timing and she's a bit loopy. But she shows up, and there's not really a routine that brings her. It's always different.
Right on. That's cool. So, let's talk about some challenges. What challenges have you faced that disrupted your creative flow?
Capitalism.
Definitely.
Yeah, I had to fill out like a doctor's form the other day, and it was like, do you have any anxiety, and if so, why? And I just wrote capitalism. I don't know, there might be men in white coats coming to take me away soon, but
coming to take me away.
But I'd say besides that, it's just I'm trying to be better about not having my phone close by. I'm pretty good when I'm writing an article or something like that. I always have, my phone's been on silent for the past like 6 years, but, having the screen face down or even in a different room, just so that it doesn't distract me with those, because we have monkey brains. And so we see those little like shiny things and we're like, oh, what's that? So I'm trying to do a better job of keeping that far away from me. One of the problems is that particularly if I'm trying to like learn a cover song or something like that, well, I'm learning it on a screen. And so then like little things pop up, little notifications. And so I'd say that's probably one of the biggest disruptions. And then just, again, with capitalism, it's like there's some paid work that pops up. I work freelance, and not every gig is one that I absolutely adore. Stuff comes up, and then I have to, remove myself from the la la land. But I will say that I feel very privileged in the sense that the work that I do, even if it's, taking headshots, even that is creative. So it's not like, I've worked at like a veterinarian's office, and, I've babysat. So it's not like a job where, although babysitting is very creative, it's not like I have a job that I hate. So even when I do have to do a gig or something, then I still get to be creative. And I think that also helps with the other creative work that I do. So yeah, I'd say capitalism is probably the biggest one. And then of course the shit that the government throws at us, whether it be, what's going on right now, like there's some organizing work that I'm doing with regards to what's happening in Palestine. And it's like, there's a never ending stream of disasters. And that's, of course, always disrupting in a sense, but it is also an inspiration. And I don't mean for that to sound kind of trite and creepy, like, oh, I'm inspired by oppression. That's not what I mean. Like, the way that I process these events is through creative means, whether that be writing an article or writing a song. And I think we all need to process these things, right? Because humans aren't supposed to like take on this much trauma and oppression, like especially directly, but even kind of indirectly through the news. So it's important that we have outlets. So I'd say while that's disrupting in a sense, of course, because it's not like I enjoy hearing about people being murdered, it is also important for me in the work that I do to be open to it as often as I can be. Of course, there's self-care times, but to be open to it and then filter it into one of the mediums that I can then share with people.
Well, yeah, you have to stay constantly informed as to what's going on, the situation, different places, so you can cover it, you can write about it. I feel the weight of it, just hearing about it, like the stuff that's going on. My soul wants to sing and play music and express itself, even if I'm just taking some time with my instrument and just sitting there and playing in a relaxed, meditative way. That's how songs come to me. That's how I start to filter and process all these things. And maybe I heard a terrible news story, and so then I grab my guitar and I start playing some really aggressive metal riffs or whatever to help to process that energy. It's really important that people don't just leave all these emotional loose ends, because it's really, really bad for not just each individual's health, but for the health of society in general. Absolutely. Let's talk about the evil specter of excuses. How do you deal with excuses on a daily basis?
My own or someone else's?
That's the exact same thing my last guest said. It's the same thing. Either both.
I think that capitalism makes us feel like we're not allowed to ever take a day off. And I think that that's something that the music industry or, quote unquote creative industries have bottled and tried to sell to people. Pay your dues and you have to suffer and all that bullshit. And, look, I lived in LA for 10 years. I paid a lot of dues. I overpaid. When I moved there, I was homeless, and there was plenty of shit that happened that I wish didn't happen, plenty of shit that I saw that I wish I didn't see. And I'm not living in a mansion in the hills. So the idea that if you just work hard enough, that's just horseshit. And I also think that, yes, you have to work hard to get good at something. I'm not trying to say that just sit back and you'll wake up as a guitar god. No, obviously not. But it should be grounded in love, right? And I can use the example of my father as the antithesis of that. He was the youngest to ever get into Juilliard at the age of 10 for cello.
Neat.
And he fucking hated it. He absolutely hated it. He was forced into it. He was forced to practice 8 hours a day. It was awful. The love of music, or the love of that playing that instrument, he still loves music, but the love of playing the instrument was beat out of him. Mm-hmm. If you're doing it because you feel obligated to, or, one of my mentors who's an engineer, once he said that he was doing a weekend intensive in the studio, and he said, if anybody's here because they want to become famous, get the hell out of my studio. And it's but these capitalistic or these sort of starving artist romanticizations that drive people are really not healthy, and they're ultimately not going to be enough to sustain you, because if music isn't something that comes from your soul, then it's too shallow to withstand the shitstorms that arise. Even if you're doing this not on a quote unquote professional level, it's not enough to withstand the shitstorms of life, where you get busy and other shit comes in the way. So it has to be grounded in a deep love for that medium, and it also has to be grounded in a feeling of if I don't do this, I might die. I have to get this off my chest. I have to share this with someone. So I think in that sense, there's no excuse to get around that. But I also think that there's also plenty of quote unquote excuses for why you didn't play today or why you didn't feel able to create. A friend of mine whose father died, a few years ago said, "I can't write a song about it and I feel shitty." And I'm like, well, you're in shock. Like most people who are in shock can barely talk. Like, so it's okay that you feel obligated to then write a song about this because that's how you process, but maybe you process 6 months later. Right. And this idea that because you see it in the movies, somebody dies and then that night they're sitting there with a whiskey and a cigarette and it's all romantic and attractive and they write a song, right? But in real life, it's like we process it, like grief is different. We process things differently. And so there's no excuse for that. It's just like, that's how humans are. And so I think that in terms of excuses for not being creative every day or excuses for not doing this or that or the other, I think this speaks to the capitalization of creativity and the idea that creativity is not on our schedule. It's not on the Gregorian calendar. It's not on the 9 to 5 schedule. This is why bands spend months in a studio, because if it was just like, this just fell out of me in a 9 to 5 slot, then all studios would be open from 9 to 5. But that's not how it is. And so I think it's important to recognize when we think of, that's an excuse, are you saying that from that place of this is my deep love and this is, or are you saying it from a sense of got to pay the bills and, I've got this to do and that other thing to do. And it's well, most of the time I find if that's how you're looking at it, mm-hmm. your muse is just going to sit her ass in the corner and not pay attention to you and be like, look, I'm on my schedule and I'll let you know when I'm ready to come.
Totally.
So I think that in terms of that, I say be kind to yourself when you might think that that's not a good enough excuse. I'm not feeling well, or I just don't feel inspired. That's okay. Go do something else, go for a walk, make some food, do something stupid, do a puzzle. I don't know. Watch an episode of Seinfeld. You don't have to beat yourself up because your creativity isn't on a capitalist schedule. And so I feel the same way with other people's excuses if it's in that, same realm of creativity. I also recognize that privilege plays a huge role in the spectrum of excuses. If somebody's struggling to eat, they have a lot more excuses for not showing up on time or being able to deliver this or that or the other thing. So I think recognizing the privilege in being able to, always show up and always be able to, quote unquote, deliver. I think that's huge too, especially if we're talking about collaborations. So I'd say when it comes to excuses, I'm pretty kind both to myself and to others. And of course there are bullshit excuses I couldn't find parking, and it's but there are times when excuses are bogus, but I think overall, overwhelmingly, when it comes to creativity, be kind with yourself and be kind with others.
Oh, I love that. So I get that, the pressure, and then that can create excuses. And then in my own head, I have my inner mother and father, right? And they're like, oh, well, you need to do all cover songs because that's all people want to hear. But wait, my thought my whole life has been, since I was 12, I always said, if I don't sing this song that I wrote, who on earth is going to sing it? Nobody's going to sing it. Nobody's going to hear it, and then nobody will ever sing it. They'll never want to sing it. They'll never have a desire to cover it. It'll be nothing, if I don't sing it, because, it's coming into the world through me. Let's talk about stress. What do you do to manage your stress, Eleanor?
Well, I'm a bit of a witch, so I really I've got several herbs. I've got concoctions that I go to because cool. I have an anxiety disorder and I have PTSD. So pharmaceuticals have never played nice with my body, mm-hmm. Whether that be birth control or meds for anxiety or things like that. So
Sure.
hormonal birth control. I've kind of dived into herbalism in that sense. Also, what I call yogatation that I do every morning. It's basically like meditating and like some light yoga. Just helps me like remember to breathe. Also like doing grounding exercises if I feel a panic attack coming on and stuff like that. One of the things that helps me is actually the work that I do, because honestly, like if you work with people on issues that are, even local issues that are really deep and systemic, and cut to the root of this, horrifying system, the fact that you fucked up some cupcakes is really not gonna bother you anymore. Or, the fact that you're late for a dinner party or something like that, it puts things into perspective. And so you kind of learn by default to not sweat small stuff. Now of course that means that you can start sweating big stuff. And I've definitely, come home from frontline reporting or actions where I'm a frazzled ball of nerves for like a week. And then I really have to like dig into the self-care tank and remind myself again that like, it's not an excuse that I, don't want to get out of bed and, watching Chicago on my laptop in bed is not like a total waste of time. It's a way for me to kind of, start to get back to neutral. There are many different ways that I manage stress. And also for me, like the working out helps a lot, and like eating healthy. I'm not like a total nut. There was a point in my life where I was, but I'm definitely not. But I try to make sure that what I'm eating is healthy. I also try to consider like where it's coming from, and boycotting industries or specific companies that don't treat people well and don't treat the land well. Trying to support local farmers and things like that. Like try to grow some of my own stuff, even though I've got like a dinky little balcony box. And also gardening is just like super de-stressing. Like they've actually done studies that show that your brain releases endorphins when you dig your hands into dirt, which is just so cool. So yeah, I think that there are tons of different ways, and I've gotten to the point where I can kind of like feel, kind of like how people have like my grandmother could feel when there was a rainstorm coming. I can feel like when there's some stress and panic coming my way, and then I can sort of like step back and address it in a variety of ways.
Very cool. What I found is whenever I'm doing something that I really need to do, like it's going to be important to me either on a self-fulfillment level or maybe even a career advancement level, there'll be extra obstacles. I mean, not unlike at the beginning when I'm obviously going to be editing this part out, but when I was trying to do the screen share and it just wasn't showing up on the list. It's just one of those things. So it's like, okay, I'm either going to get frazzled and I'm going to ruin the rest of this interview, or I'm going to practice what I've been preaching the last year, take a couple of deep breaths, and just, it'll work when it's ready to work. And then that's what happened. So I really appreciate that. There's so much synchronicity in the world, and one of the things that I love about doing this podcast in particular is that I seem to have this ability to take and translate what people say like on this kind of ethereal level and kind of like grounded in reality. If people got more fulfillment from their work, then even if maybe they didn't make as much money, then maybe they wouldn't need to spend as much money medicating themselves with things that capitalism teaches us to, just buy a new $69.95 blouse that you'll wear once and then it'll sit in your closet till you donate it to charity. That'll make you feel better. And it's like, what? No.
It's funny that consumption, like what we do, is actually another word for a wasting disease. I think like there's nuance there, right? Like
right.
Some people obviously do need what like science has made possible. Like, people who, I have a dear friend that's schizophrenic, and they need to take a pharmaceutical drug so that they don't have episodes that are really horrific for them
Certainly.
and their loved ones. But for someone like me, who's I'm privileged enough to not have something like that, and my PTSD is not severe enough that I can regulate it with herbs, and the pharmaceuticals that I've tried have not worked for me. So I think it's all about nuance, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's about recognizing that just because I want to live in a way that centers herbs doesn't mean that I want to live in a tree. I mean, I'm down to live in a tree, but I also recognize that look, I need this computer device in order to do the work that I do. I don't want to be a Luddite. And understanding that there's a spectrum of this, there's a lot of nuance here. And so I think that recognizing the variety of ways that people need support in the way for them to really thrive, not just survive, will also give us so many more ideas as to how to build society that is not capitalist, but is also not Luddite, right? A way to build society so that everyone who needs what they need in order to thrive has it.
Mm-hmm. And I just love you bring up nuance, because I feel like that's probably one of the biggest lacking things in political theater entertainment today. You got to be able to take it and look at the whole picture, and yeah, it's especially when you talk to somebody open-minded, a lot of times we can find more common ground than things that we disagree about, especially if both parties are open to nuance and not seeing everything as, oh well, if you're not with me, you're my enemy.
Yeah, and I think it's important. We all have a line to draw, right? To where across this line, I don't hang with people. So if somebody's an avowed fascist, I'm not going to hang with you. I have nothing to offer. And as one of my mentors, Kilu Nyasha, a former Black Panther, said, some folks are just going to die wrong, and that's okay. I have to accept that. If you're going to die a fascist, please hurry up and do so. So I think everybody has that line to draw. If we're going to sit down at a table and you can't sit with me and recognize my human rights, I have nothing to say to you. But I think the vast majority of people, right, are on the other side of that line, on the me side of that line. And then I don't fuck with the people on the other side. But the people on this side that, have different labels or don't have labels, and they're I don't know, I just hate this system. If you asked 100 people on the street, are you happy with the government? I'd be shocked if less than 95 said, no, I'm not happy with the government. So it's there's the common ground. Again, everybody has a different line that they have to draw and say, across this line, I can't go for my own personal safety or what have you. And then, there will be people who have, depending on our lines, we can cross and we can bring people over. I think this is really what's what community organizing and what community building is about, making sure that everybody feels safe enough to do the work, and have set their boundaries very clearly and made it clear to their comrades and their friends, okay, well, this is where I'm at. And I think that's important.
Excellent. Man, you've been just such an incredible guest to have today, Eleanor. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here with me. I can't wait to hear more music from you. And I mean, I'm going to be checking out your other work too. Not necessarily as excited about, if there's big bad news that you're reporting and telling me, but I'm going to keep going to you, because you've earned my trust over the time here. And I really, really love it. So keep up doing the great work and fighting the good fight. Why don't you tell us about what other social media you have? Okay.
I use Vimeo. That's where the trailers for my film are housed. And so, that's Eleanor Goldfield if you're on Vimeo. Twitter and Instagram are at Radical Eleanor, and everything, including links to buy the album, to check out the film, all the articles, the spoken word, everything that I do is at artkillingapathy.com.
Yep, great site. There's going to be links in the description. And thank you again so much for being here with me, Eleanor.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you.